What's up, Game Dev crew? I'm excited to have you back here in the Forge where we're going to get a taste of 2D animation. I hope you had fun getting your feet wet with 2D pixel art last week, but let's take that a step further and bring those drawings to life. In case you didn't already know, animation is an optical illusion. Whenever you see something move around on a screen, they aren't actually moving. Rather, what you're seeing is a series of still images, or frames, that are displayed in rapid succession, one after another. Now, the human eye and brain can only process up to 10 to 12 separate images per second, retaining an image for about a 1/15 of a second. If a subsequent image replaces it in this period of time, it will create the illusion of continuity or movement. But now that you know the science behind it, let's talk about some artistic considerations when approaching animation. In 1981, two Disney animators introduced 12 basic principles of animation to produce more realistic works. These principles have been embraced by the animation community, and nearly every professional animator makes use of them. Let's go over them briefly. First, there's squash and stretch, which gives a sense of weight and volume to an object. Anticipation provides clues to the viewer of what's going to happen next. Staging keeps the audience's attention directed at what is most important. Straight ahead and pose to pose are two different approaches to the actual drawing process. You can either draw the animation frame by frame from beginning to end, which is the straight ahead approach, or you can identify key poses throughout the animation called keyframes and fill in the necessary movements between. Using a combination of both techniques can create a more dynamic illusion of movement. Now, follow through relates to parts of the subject that continue to move after an action is completed. To get scientific about it, don't forget about inertia. Now, ease in and ease out suggests that every movement needs time to accelerate and slow down. More frames dedicated to the beginning and ending movements of an animation will make it look more real. Next up is curved lines. Very few things in nature occur in straight lines. Your subject will feel more lifelike if it follows a curved path. Secondary action adds more dimension to a scene. Now, this must work carefully in conjunction with staging, as not to draw attention away from the main action, but rather support it. Next up is timing. Use more frames to create slower action and less frames to create a faster one. Exaggeration. A perfect imitation of reality can look static and dull. Exaggeration can help bring an animation to life. Having solid drawing skills, you still need to consider all of the fundamentals of drawing when animating. Structure, anatomy, color, and light are all just as important here. And last but not least, you need to create some appeal that will help audiences find likable qualities about your characters. One way to do this is to vary the traits of your characters by tweaking some of those fundamental aspects like structure, anatomy, color, and light. There is a fantastic video done by Alan Becker that exemplifies each of these principles, and I suggest you give it a good, honest watch. Okay, now it's time to relate these principles to games. Drawn assets for 2D games generally fall in one of two categories: background and sprites. The distinction here is that sprites are non-static objects in the game that move independently of the background. Things like player characters, items, and enemies are sprites. Now, since sprites generally are capable of movement, they tend to be the most animated. An important aspect of animating sprites is the use of sprite sheets. Rather than having each frame of an animation be saved in its own image file, a sprite sheet is a single image file that contains all the frames necessary for a particular animation. This helps a lot with resource management when building a game. And when you feel like you're ready to tackle your first animation, head on over to Piskel.com. Piskel is a great browser-based tool for drawing and animating sprites. Now let's take a look at some of its features. Okay, so here we are at PiskelApp.com. Just a couple of the options here on the homepage. You can go ahead and just start creating a sprite. But I recommend, if you're going to be doing this for a while and want to save your artwork, go ahead and create an account. It really just links up to your Google account. You can use your school account to do this. That will bring you to your homepage. This is where you'll be able to see all your saved animations, PNG sequences, sprite sheets. Great little account to have. All right, but from here, up here at the top right, we're going to go to Create a Sprite to open up the editor window. And here we are. You'll notice that this is really similar to our low spec editor window. A lot of the same elements here. Right in the middle we have our artboard. Over to the left here we have a bunch of different tools that we can use. A lot of these were in low spec also. A few of them are new, but we'll go over those in just a minute. Between these tools and the artboard we have our frames bar here, and we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. Over here in the top right is your animation preview screen. This is actually going to cycle through all the frames automatically all the time so that you can see your animation and what it looks like in real time as you create it. A couple other boxes down here. We have the layers box. This functions just like layers do in low spec, so you can break up your image into individually editable layers. Really useful for animation. We'll talk about that some more. All the tools here in Transform will affect the image, the entire image as a whole. And we have our palette bar down here, so really similar to the way we had a palette bar in low spec. All the way over to the right here is the more administrative tools. You can have preferences, which we'll go over those settings in just a minute. Here's where you resize your canvas to be as big as however many pixels you want it to be. This is the save option. This will save to your gallery, and then our export and import options as well. All right, but let's go ahead and start taking a look at some of the tools over here. Okay, so really similar to low spec, we have our pen tool. Okay, this allows us to draw pixel by pixel whatever we want. Right, we can change the color with anything we have in our palette over here. Okay. One fun little tool here is the vertical mirror pen. This can actually mirror vertically or horizontally. Let's go ahead and demonstrate that real quick. Imagine there being an invisible line down the middle here. Whatever I do on this side gets done on the opposite side as well. See that? Okay. And if you notice, when you hover over here, we have some options here. If we hold down Command, it'll use the horizontal axis. Right? So I'm going to hold down Command on mine, or I think it would be Control on a Windows computer. Let me get a new color here just so we can see this happen. Look, now it's mirroring on this axis here. You can imagine there being an invisible line causing a mirror here. If I hold down Shift, it's going to do it on the horizontal and vertical, which means it really breaks it up into quadrants here. So there's like 4 areas for this to be, right? So this is a nice way to get some symmetrical drawings. If you need some symmetry in your drawing, this is a really useful way to do that, right? Instead of counting how many pixels you've gone from the center, right, you can just mirror it either vertically, horizontally, or in quadrants like this. Right, let's take a few steps back. By the way I'm doing that is Command Z or Control Z. If you're on a Windows computer, that's a nice easy way to step back. All right, we have the fill tool. You guys should be familiar with that. That'll just fill everything you've got with whatever color you have in it. Remember, it does stay within boundaries, so if you use the fill tool in here, it's only going to fill up inside of there. This is like the nuclear bomb fill tool. This will not behave in the same way that the bucket does, right? So remember here, this bucket will only fill in what's constrained by these, right? Okay, let's take a step back and use the nuke. I call it the nuke tool, right? Here we go. I'm gonna just put 1 pixel right here and boom, it's just gonna do the entire thing, right? You'll notice it says that once you hover over this, paint all pixels the same color. All right, so that's just if you wanna wash everything real quick. Okay, we have the eraser tool, pretty self-explanatory, right? Erases pixels that have been painted. This is a really useful tool as well, the line tool. Okay, this wasn't in low spec. This allows us to draw, quote unquote straight lines, okay, by clicking and dragging. Okay, so what I'm doing here is if I click here and hold down and drag, and I can get this straight line and place it anywhere that I need to. Right, so this is a way of producing straight lines. All right, just like low spec, we have a rectangle tool, right? So we can make rectangles all day long. That's nice and convenient. Something new is the circle tool. Okay, I'm gonna actually go ahead and leave this one up because we're gonna use this as a demonstration here, right? But now we can make circles, right? So that's really cool. Let me go ahead and fill this in because we're gonna use, actually that's a little big. Let's make it a little bit smaller. That's better. All right. Okay, the hand tool, just like low spec, can move whatever object you grab around there. It really moves your entire layer. That's actually really important to note. It moves the entire layer. So if I were to have a different layer, I can demonstrate this. Let me go ahead and make a tip for working with layers. Name your layers appropriately. Be really specific when you name your layers. Red ball. Okay. I'm gonna make a second layer and call it green ball. Okay, let's grab this. let's grab this green right here, and I'll make a really similar ball, almost the exact same size. Okay, but notice I have the green ball layer selected, so when I use my hand tool, it's only moving the green ball around. You see that? Okay, if I go to my red ball layer, you'll see it only moves the red ball around. All right, we have the shape selection. This will basically identify the shape so that you can manipulate it. You can also select things within a certain area, so you can use a rectangle to select something, and if I hold down shift, I can move whatever I do select. All right, let's see how this works a little bit better. Let's make another yellow ball right here. All right, we'll fill that in. Okay, now here's my second layer, right, which is the green ball layer. Okay, but I'm only gonna select this portion of it. Watch, I can move that around. See how that works? Okay, so whatever you select in here, you're able to edit and move around. That's really useful because sometimes you don't want to redraw certain parts of your picture. You just want to move something. So this allows you. Let's grab that again. This allows you to do just that. Move certain parts of your image around. Just so you know too, once you select it, once you're moving it around, you can't just click out, because if you just click out, then you will lose whatever's in that selection. You have to hit enter to drop it where you want to. Okay, so you highlight it, hold down shift, click and drag to move it around, and then hit enter where you want to drop it. Okay, now that's a rectangle selection tool. You can do this lasso selection tool, which basically allows you to draw a shape of what you want to move around. This is really cool, and this lighten tool is awesome. This allows you to really conveniently add shadow or light to your drawing. So let's pretend we have a light source coming from this direction. Okay, I'm going to lighten up this area of my ball. If I hold down command, I'm going to darken this side of my ball. Right, so it automatically changes colors of your brush to lighten or darken certain areas, which is really, really cool. Nice little ball with a shine mark on it and a shadow behind it. That's cool. All right, well, let's start looking at the animation process here. Let's make a simple animation of this ball bouncing up and down. Okay, now applying the principles of animation, or the first principle of the 12 that we talked about, we're going to want this ball to squish when it hits the floor, stretch when it starts coming back up. Right, it's going to be right in this position, right in this regular old round circle position, right about here, right? But as it comes to the top, we want it to squish just a little bit too, so that it looks like it's getting ready to fall back down, right? And as it's falling back down, it will stretch again and bounce up, bounce up, bounce up. All right, so let's set up a pose to pose and then fill the animation in between. Okay, so here's how the frame bar works. You can add a new frame, and that's fine, except you're going to be starting with a blank frame, so that's usually not super useful. The best thing to do is to duplicate the previous frame, right? So now I already have this ball right here. Okay, let's go ahead and just move this in the position that we want it to once it's all the way flat. Okay, so let's bring it all the way down here. You can see my animation starting to freak out over here, right? Those are the two frames. I just have two frames. It's bouncing in between the two. Okay, but let's take this. Let's grab the appropriate colors. All right, let's grab this. Let's make it squish down, like it's really squished. Okay, let's erase the top here, and we'll add our appropriate shine marks again. Let's make sure we have just a little bit up here still. Okay. All right, let's add a shine mark here, and let's do our shadows down here. Okay, all right, so we have these two. Notice that it actually got a little bit wider too as it squished, right? Okay, so that's our peak, right? Let's add this same thing. Let's duplicate this, right? And let's have it more or less look the same as it bounces up. Okay, now let's fill in between these things. All right, so let's again duplicate this one up here. Okay, now we want something that's going, what is it going to look like between this point and this point, right? Well, according to our principles, we want it to stretch a little bit here, right? Okay, so let's have it stretch oblong just a little bit. All right, so that's right in between, but let's add another frame. Remember how we talked about speeding up and ramping down, right? This is kind of the fast falling action, so let's add a frame right before this. Okay, so that's actually, we can go ahead and keep this one here, but let's edit this one, right? And let's bring this one up again just a little bit. Okay, and we can change this just a little bit. So now let's actually start getting it to squish. All right, so let's bring this one all the way down. Let's duplicate that and keep it squishing. Squish, squishity, squish. All right, that actually looks like a decent fall and squish to me, right there, right? So the final frame of the squish being this one, right, where we started, you know, but we filled in the action up until that point, right? Or something to make this a little quicker, we can just reverse the process up until we get to this point, and then just have it go the other way, right? So let's have one of these happen right after that, and then let's copy this one. And there we have it. It's a little bouncing ball there. That looks pretty cool. All right, I can make it bounce a little faster by increasing the frames per second, or I can make it bounce really slow. Right? Here's a nice natural pace right here. So that's cool. All right, something that you're going to want to do though, if you're going to be doing characters, all right, this is what I was talking about earlier with the layers. It's going to be really helpful if you separate all the major parts of a character into their own layers. That way you can animate each one individually. Here's a fine example, right? Here I got my Boba Fett. Okay, now he's turning his head at one frame here, right? Now, you notice the difference between here. All I actually did was use the transform. I mirrored this layer, so it turned the other way, right? And then I scooted over a little bit, so, you know, it looked like he was turning his head on his neck there, right? But that took me, 5 seconds to do, instead of having to redraw his whole head face the other way, right? But I'm only able to do that because I have his head separate from all the other layers. Okay, the other thing that I animated here was his left arm, but you'll notice here I animate just his left arm coming up to his helmet to check his comm link. I can draw all I want to in his left arm and not worry about disturbing the other pixels around his torso or his legs, right? Because it's on its own layer, right? So when you're animating characters, this is a really, really convenient and nice way to organize things, right? It's going to make your life a lot easier if you think about the layers and what's going to be in each layer, what you want to be animated and moving. Just some other things here. So you can preview your animation in a pop-up to see what it looks like. Now let's talk about the settings a little bit. Okay, preferences. You can change the background of the canvas that you're drawing on. I prefer this one. It's the nicest. Grid allows you to set up a grid on the canvas so you can see individual pixel lines and where they are. That's something that you would like to be able to see. Also concerning the grid though is really the canvas size, and that's going to be this option down here. So you can resize the canvas to be a lot bigger. 32 is the size of this one. I think we had talked about a good starter place is 16 by 16, though you will find, even though 16 by 16 is a great place to start with illustration, the smaller your canvas is for animation, the less you're going to feel like you're going to be able to really represent in terms of motion. So the higher resolution this is, the more detailed animations you'll be able to get. Not just more detailed illustrations, but more detailed animations. The anchor point is something that's important. This has to do with the sprite sheet. If you're going to be moving your animation around in a game, this is like its source point. It gives you a 9x9 grid here and there's other programs that are more detailed with this, but you can either have the origin of the animation be, bottom middle, bottom right, bottom left, dead center, what have you. All right, but it's really just the registration point of where the computer considers the animation to be sitting. Save, pretty self-explanatory. You can title it, give it a description. You can make it public or not. You can save it as a Piscal file. Actually save it onto your machine as a Piscal file, which is kind of cool. Exporting. Now this is something you do need to know. When you are ready to export, I would like you to make a sprite sheet. All right, so what you're going to do is under the PNG tab here, I think defaultly it may go to GIF here, and you can make a GIF if you want, but for the purposes of the assignment, I need you to export a sprite sheet. So you don't really have to change these all that much. Keep the scale, one time. I don't want it any bigger than what it is. Keep the resolution, whatever the resolution of your drawing was. You don't need to change the columns and rows, but this is the option that I want you to select. I want you to download the sprite sheet file. All right, and all that's going to do is download a PNG. If you look at that PNG, this is what the PNG looks like. It's just going to be a single image with every frame of your animation represented. The last option over here is import. So you can import an existing image actually. You can bring in either a Piscal file that you save, you can bring in a PNG, JPEG, or BMP, or an animated GIF. So for example, if you download your low spec character that you made last week and bring it in as a PNG, it's just going to be a flat image. All right, so if you did do layers in your low spec, if you import as a PNG into here, it's going to come in flat and you're going to lose your layers. All right, so don't count on being able to do that. It'd probably be better for you to just recreate whatever you wanted to in here using the appropriate layers so that you can animate them a lot easier. Okay,
and that about wraps it up. Your assignment this week is to animate a character and produce a sprite sheet. If you're feeling a little intimidated, start small with something like an idle animation. It's nice to always have some kind of movement going on, even if a character is only standing still. If you're feeling pretty confident, try an action sequence like walking, running, or jumping. I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. Have fun with it, and I'll see you next time in the Forge.